Do you ever get to a point in your life where you're looking around yourself and you see all these random, disparate phenomena occurring and you're like, something seems connected here? And then you try to figure out why everything's connected, but then this is the question. Do you ever feel like, should I be connecting all these things? Are these things truly emergent? Do they have any correlation? Are they caused by the same thing? What's going on? A number of different things have just happened recently, just in this last week, and even the last couple of days, that it just feels like they're all tied together for me. So this might be a conspiracy thing. And I know it's, well, one of the things that you're not supposed to do anymore, at least as far as Tim Cook is concerned, is to spin conspiracy theories.
We won't give a platform to violent conspiracy theorists on the App Store.
Any conspiracy theory that he defines as hate is something that he has a moral obligation to stamp out or to kick off the Apple platform.
Why? Because it's the right thing to do.
Now, obviously, there's some bad ideas. There are lots of bad ideas. But what's the worst idea of them all is to not be able to talk about ideas or to look at ideas and closely examine ideas to see if they're bad or not. That is the worst idea, I think. He used some really religious language.
Our morality, our own innate desire to separate right from wrong, choosing to set that responsibility aside at a moment of trial is a sin.
That's kind of one thread that I'm seeing. Secondly, this guy named Kevin Hart, he was going to host the Oscars, and then somebody went through and found that 9 or 10 years ago, he made some homophobic jokes that he had subsequently apologized for.
My team calls me, oh my God, Kevin, the world is upset about tweets you did years ago. Oh my God. Guys, I'm almost 40 years old. If you don't believe that people change, grow, evolve as they get older, I don't know what to tell you.
But he bowed out of hosting the Oscars.
So I just got a call from the Academy, and that call basically said, Kevin, apologize for your tweets of old, or we're going to have to move on and find another host. I'm talking about the tweets from 2009, 2010. I chose to pass. I passed on the apology. The reason why I passed is because I've addressed this several times. This is not the first time this has come up. I've addressed it. I've spoken on it. I've said where the rights and wrongs were. I've said who I am now versus who I was then. I've done it. I've done it. I'm not going to continue to go back and tap into the days of old when I moved on and I'm in a completely different space in my life. The same energy that went into finding those old tweets could be the same energy put into finding the response to the questions that have been asked years after years after years. We feed in the internet trolls and we reward them. I'm not going to do it, man. I'm going to be me. I'm going to stand my ground.
That's another thing. Like that's a whole moral panic that goes back into your history and looks for something that is wrong now that wasn't necessarily that offensive beforehand. Now, not to say that there isn't cause for people to stray away from mocking certain categories, which will lead me to my next point. We should actually, be a little bit more respectful about, the difficulty that certain groups have had in life. I believe in that. I don't think that that's that controversial an idea to say that certain people in certain categories do experience oppression. Now, saying that and doing something about it is the whole question that I have. Like, how do we proceed towards an anti-racist or an anti-oppressive attitude? And how do we ensure that that anti-oppression or that anti-racism isn't in itself, in fact, racist or sexist or phobic of some sort? That which espouses phobia as a marker to denigrate and shove other people around is itself, it seems like to me, is itself acting out of fear more than that which is homophobic or transphobic or any of these phobes. But anyways, I guess this is the third phenomena that's disturbed me, is like this clip has been floating around Twitter. And it's a very triggering clip. It's from this woman named Hannah Gadsby, and she is an Australian comedian who has recently done a special on Netflix that begins kind of as, just like your regular let's bag on white people comedy, or let's bag on men comedy, and slowly gets more and more intense until it becomes a confession about her very damaged life.
I don't hate men, but I wonder how a man would feel if they'd have lived my life. Because it was a man who sexually abused me when I was a child. It was a man who beat the shit out of me when I was 17, my prime. It was two men who raped me when I was barely in my 20s. Tell me, why is that okay? Why was it okay to pick me off the pack like that and do that to me? It would have been more humane to just take me out to the back paddock and put a bullet in my head if it is that much of a crime to be different.
Her comedy special it's kind of heartrending, and at the same time, like, you're supposed to feel something about it. You're supposed to feel that she's speaking to you, especially if you're a man. She's calling you out as a man. Then she gets invited to this Hollywood Reporter breakfast, which is celebrating 100 women in Hollywood or something like that. Where is it? It's over here. Power 100 Women in Entertainment.
I want to speak about the good men. You're going to regret that clap.
I want to deconstruct this clip because I think that there's a lot of bad ideas in it. And I think that bad ideas should be called out. But the thing is that I want to tie together is that this is the elite. And this is the stuff that the elite is pushing now. They're no longer pushing comedy. They're pushing offendedness. And any sort of comedy has to be about bagging on a certain group of people, groups that are perceived to be in power, or groups that statistically end up in positions of power. Like, that is the comedy that we're supposed to swallow. And anybody who's even in a minority group who ends up making fun of another minority group, they're in trouble too. At the same time that this is happening in Hollywood, these major corporations that control media, that control secondary media, or like, what am I, 40th tier media at this point? Like us independent creators who can be filling in gaps that the mainstream media is no longer filling in, like stuff that's actually funny, stuff that's actually informative. We are using these corporations to connect with you, the audience, and these corporations are now ratcheting up, they're hatcheting down on certain opinions. What we're heading towards is a single monomaniacal idea of what the function of media should be. And everybody who does not fall into these categories of accepting and spouting these ideas are going to be shut off. And that's my fourth thing. Sargon of Akkad just got kicked off Patreon. I don't know exactly why. There were some rumors that like some 4chan alt-right Nazi trolls got Patreon to kick him off. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But again, Sargon is like, what, 12th tier entertainment? But he's being squashed because he goes against the grain. He goes against the accepted ideology, the accepted narrative. And what is that narrative? I think it's quite aptly summed up by Hannah Gadsby's little speech here. So here we go.
My issue is that when good men talk about bad men, they always ignore the line in the sand. The line in the sand that is inevitably drawn whenever a good man talks about bad men. I am a good man. Here is the line. There are all the bad men.
Okay, so what she's doing is saying that all good men always draw a line between themselves and the bad men. She's created this category called men, and then she split them into good men and bad men, and now she's going to proceed to say that even the good men are bad men, because nobody's going to be able to, I'll let her say it, perceive their own badness. But does that hold true for her?
We need to talk about how men will draw a different line for every different occasion. They have a line for the locker room, a line for when their wives, mothers, daughters and sisters are watching, another line for when they're drunk and fratting, another line for non-disclosure, a line for friends and a line for foes.
This line of appropriate behavior changes depending on context. Is she suggesting, and I don't know if she's building a positive argument, but is she suggesting that there should be one unilinear line of behavior? And should a man never cross that line no matter what situations he's in? I guess she's trying to talk about misogyny. Like, if I have certain misogynist feelings, I should keep them to myself. And furthermore, I shouldn't say them to women, of course. I shouldn't say them around women that I'm in love with or women who are in my family. I shouldn't say them to women on the street. I believe in that. I believe in certain sorts of propriety. And then she wants to carry that propriety into when I'm not around women. I should hold a certain framework of attitudes around when I'm not around women, or when I'm drunk, or when I'm in all these different states. One of the problems that I have with this idea is that, how do you correct this? How do you correct this line, this changing line in the sand? It comes down to certain principles, right? It comes down to certain rules. Who gets to write those rules, and how do we assess what those rules exactly are? Now, I'm not defending the disrespecting of women. I'm not defending that, but I'm still wary of a totalitarian regime that wants to police respect and disrespect. But at the same time as saying that, I do think that there are social forces that put pressure on what you can and can't say. And if she is saying that the social forces have gone too far into allowing men to disrespect women, and that she wants to increase the pressures on men to not disrespect women because it's had a certain amount of fallout, it's had a certain amount of fallout in her life, and that's kind of like what's undergirding her. She's been severely abused, or at least abused enough to be righteously angry about it all the time. But the other question is, why is she being platformed? And is there a weaponization that's going on in her being platformed, in her message?
You know why we need to talk about this line between good men and bad men? Because it's only good men who get to draw that line.
Now that's absolutely, utterly stupid. That only good men draw the line between good men and bad men. I think everybody collectively draws the line between what's good and what's bad. We have various different apparatuses within our culture and our history that inform what is a good man and what is a bad man. If you go back into at least religious history, there's a lot written about that. You don't steal, you don't murder, you don't lust, you don't do this, you don't do that, you don't do this, you don't do that. And then there's these positive attributes where you love your neighbor as yourself and so on and so forth. So is she ascribing that all of those were only ever written by the good men to define the bad men? And did women not take part in that at all? Have women not taken part in the moral discourse that has happened over the centuries? Now, you could say probably not, because the written evidence is that mostly men have been putting this down, but I've worked a lot in preschool, and I can see that there's a very strong influence that mothers and women within the childcare industry exert on establishing moral behavior in children. And that's oral, not really written down. That's by force of social pressures and stuff. So it's not just good men or just people who perceive themselves as good men that are writing the rules of behavior.
And guess what? All men believe they are good. We need to talk about this because guess what happened?
Now, everybody in this room is supposed to agree with her. Everybody in this room is supposed to clap on command, and they will when they're being shown to. But there is a lot of faces that belie that not everybody's getting this, but you kind of have to get this because this is the elite, and the elite has to accept this narrative. You have to accept this narrative now, and you're put on pressure to accept this narrative. I guess we all know the phenomenon of everybody just like going along, whether they believe it or not. But if all these people are so influential and they're all going along with this, and then they got the ear of Tim Cook and people at Google, and they're all going along with this and kicking people off the platform that they don't want heard, and they start with the most extreme and then the little less extreme, and then they start to bury in the algorithms certain results and start to very slowly change the narrative. But what gives them the authority to control the narrative other than that they have the authority to do so?
We need to talk about this because guess what happens when only good men get to draw that line? This world. A world full of good men who do very bad things and still believe in their heart of hearts that they are good men because they have not crossed the line.
If you are a good man and you do bad things, does that not disqualify you from being a good man? What she's trying to bring to light is hypocrisy. It's embedded in everybody's nature to think that they are in the right, of course, or at least that their will be done.
A world full of good men who do very bad things and still believe in their heart of hearts that they are good men because they have not crossed the line, because they moved the line for their own good. Women should be in control of that line, no question.
All right. She wants to give all the power of defining a man to that which is not men, or to defining the goodness or badness of a man to another category. And then she says this is great, because she says,
now take everything I have said up unto this point and replace man with white person.
So everybody who's not white should now have the power to say what's a good white person, what's a bad white person. And then she goes even further.
And know that if you are a white woman, you have no place drawing lines in the sand between good white people and bad white people.
So you don't have the ability yourself to see what is good and what is bad. You need to form the locus of control of your moral makeup or your moral evaluation to that which you are not. So every one of us has to look at every single one of our categories and then assign the authority of saying if we're good this category or a bad this category to somebody who's categorically other than us. But how do we know that any given person of another category won't just use that categorical power to describe us as a good X or a bad X to their own advantageousness? It's totally intersectional. She goes on even further.
I encourage you to also take the time to replace man with straight or cis or able-bodied or neurotypical, etc., etc.
Everybody should be judging everybody else only insofar as they are a different category. And she's got a really big problem with being othered. She expresses it quite clearly in her special.
You need to learn what this feels like, because this tension is what not normals carry inside of them all of the time, because it is dangerous to be different.
So this is the thing. I can understand where she's coming from and completely disagree with the way that she's going about trying to assert her will. She talks about non-normal people are always under a state of tension, and I think that I can have the capacity to empathize with that, to empathize with not being normal or not being normal in any given circumstance. I think we all, to a certain degree, can empathize with that, but I guess she would say that as a white, cis, heterosexual, whatever man, I have no right to even empathize with somebody who's different. I just need to obey them. I can never make a connection with them, a sympathetic connection with them. I just have to completely prostrate myself before them because of historical disadvantages or historical advantages or some sort of calculus. Again, this calculus comes up. Who gets to decide for whom what is right, what is wrong, what is good, what is bad? And I think that underneath it all, I do want to live in a society where morality is prized, where people treat each other with respect, where showing disrespect is punished, but the punishment needs to suit the crime. If you say a joke that is perceived to be homophobic, then people really need to understand your intentions, and they really can't apply a systematic analysis to every single given one of your statements. But that's what they want to do. They want to have it both ways. When they critique the systematic inequalities, and you come back and say, well, I'm a good person, and I don't have any racism, I don't really have any homophobia, and then they'll say, well, yeah, you're not adding to it because you're thinking in an individual level, but you're ignoring all the systemic problems, and then you turn around and it turns out that you did say something on one individual instance within a certain context that could be construed from another instance in another context as adding into the systemic biases or whatever. Then they'll come down upon you personally and try to destroy your individuality, try to destroy your agency, try to destroy your reputation because you violated their principles. So I do understand that there is systemic inequalities. I do understand that there's individual characteristics, and I don't understand how we can bridge those two things by going the external route of only judging people based on their immutable characteristics. I do not understand who can possibly calculate that and who can possibly implement that. And I do not trust people who got their power by means of distributing little devices, right? My little iPhone, wherever it is. Like the person who's in power of Apple is gotten power of Apple for being really good with working with companies and shipping boxes around the world, right? He's an operation coordinator guy, right? He's into system thinking. Now he wants to apply his thinking into the public morality. I don't necessarily want people who made their mark in the world and gained their power through being beautiful, by manipulating emotions, by doing everything that Hollywood does, which is basically pleasing us, pouring food into our brains that satisfies the lowest common denominator of us. And now they want to be the ones to dictate our morality. They want to be the ones who are the professors, or not the professors, the priests of the church. I do not like this latest crossover movie of this new church now taking over various institutions of media and technology and stuff like that, especially when they are using an appeal to emotion that is logically unimplementable, that women get to draw the lines for men, right? And she says it right here. Listen to this.
All my life, I've been told that I'm a man-hater. I don't hate men. I honestly do not. You see, I don't even believe that women are better than men. I believe women are just as corruptible by power as men, because you know what, fellas? You don't have a monopoly on the human condition, you arrogant fucks.
So she even admits that women don't have the capacity to not be corrupted, that we all fall into this human situation. But she has been so impacted by men in her life that she wants to, and she's been giving the ability to be the voice of not man hatred, no, but putting men in their place, or this comeuppance, this reverse engineering of discrimination, of misogyny or misandry that's coming back and that you can't stand in the way of, because insofar as I am a man, I can never decide if I myself am good or not. Insofar as I do not agree with the progressive agenda, I need to be silenced, or I need to silence myself. I need to watch my words, because I'm going to lose out on any given public that would agree with me, because the people who are in charge don't want that public to assemble. They do not want us to assemble with one another. Even people who aren't radical, or even people who are somewhat radical, or even people who are just radical with the tongue in their cheek, the trolls and stuff like that. It will be getting more and more intense and extreme as these people get more and more inflated in their righteous indignation. It's not going to stop. I don't know how it's going to stop. Rather, I don't want to be completely doom and gloom, but we have a lot of weird ass, like these people who got into power by entertaining us and giving us what we want, now want to decide what we can and cannot say, can and cannot think, can and cannot listen to, can and cannot say, can and cannot believe, can and cannot feel. And then they trot out people who are damaged to flog themselves, to feel virtuous. Yeah, there's this whole virtue thing, like, yeah, let's flog ourselves. Yeah, men are so bad. And there's a lot of evidence that men are bad. There's a lot of evidence that men are bad. So they're trotting out this woman to promulgate that so that they feel virtuous and then they can clap along, but also to signal that this is the new reality. This is the new Hollywood. This is the new order of the day. It's a reinvention of this American pastime of Puritanism and of teetotaling. And when it comes to her just giving her own story and speaking out from the anger and the hurt that she feels, I think it's genuine. I absolutely can say and not mock it and say that's really genuine. I understand that. I do not agree with your conclusions. I do not agree with how you want the world to change, but I do agree that the world does need to change. I do agree that those who are in power need to be very responsible and very aware of the effect their power has on others. I do not agree with violence. I do not want women to feel unsafe. I don't want any of those things. I don't want to contribute to a society that espouses those things, but I do not want to enter into the opposite society where I'm going to be squashed and without due process stamped out of existence, without any sort of argument. And that's the problem. That's the problem. That this is all based on emotion, and therefore it can get away with some very shoddy ideas.
The only people who lose their humanity are those who believe they have the right to render another human being powerless. They are the weak. To yield and not break, that is incredible strength.
Meow.